So this was one of the things that when Coleman Hughes and our buddy Dave Smith got into it with was about whether you remember when they brought up this 7 countries thing that, and he was saying that there was no real proof that exists, that he didn't actually read it. He was told that we were going to go into 7 countries. But, I was talking to Dave about this the other day. He's like, if you just look at the fact that we did everything on that list except Iran, every single one of them took place except Iran. Like, he's like, I really want to go and do that debate again, and I can't get Coleman to sit down with me.
Yeah, yes. For people who are interested in the subject, long term, there's no mystery about the connection between the neoconservatives' doctrines and then the activities that the W administration engaged in, subsequent. I mean, what happened was you have, Andrew Coburn, the great journalist Andrew Coburn, says that the neoconservatives are a cross between the Israel lobby and the military-industrial complex. The fighter bomber salesmen needed eggheads to justify their policies, and the neoconservatives wanted to support Israel, wanted to support American hegemony, and so took all the military-industrial complex money to build their think tanks, to create their consensus, to build their policy. Their own kind of thousand little council on foreign relations is to get what they want. And then when, the 7 countries thing is...
So what we're talking about, just to clarify, is Wesley Clark was given... he was on some television show. I forget what the show was. Do you remember?
There's 2 different statements. One of them I know was with Amy Goodman from Democracy Now!
That's right. Democracy Now!
And basically what he's talking about is, he says that a military officer of some rank told then retired but still with access, former General Wesley Clark, who had been the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO forces in Europe under Bill Clinton, did the Kosovo War. So a very prominent 4-star general. And he said, the way he told the story was, he told him, hey, they're planning for a war with Iraq. And he said, Iraq, why? And the guy said, I don't know. And then the second part of the story was he came back a week later or something, and the same guy said, there's this memo that has the 7 countries. And they say they want to take them all in 5 years. So they, meaning the office of the Secretary of Defense. So that's Donald Rumsfeld, who's not a neoconservative. He's his own separate thing here. But he's the Secretary of Defense. But all of his guys, all of his most important guys are neoconservatives. So the Deputy Secretary of Defense is Paul Wolfowitz. The Deputy Secretary of Defense for Intelligence is Stephen Cambone. The Deputy Secretary of Defense for Policy is Douglas Feith. And then under him is Abram Shulsky and Bill Lutey and all of these guys, Michael Rubin and others, who are all working on this project to get us into Iraq. And this is the neoconservative network of power. You got Scooter Libby and David Wormser would travel around from state to defense to the vice president's office, but you got Scooter Libby and John Hanna in the vice president's office. You got Zalmay Khalilzad and Elliot Abrams on the National Security Council, Robert Joseph and Stephen Hadley and Eric Edelman. All of these guys were already the network of guys who agreed with this policy going back through the 1990s. It was what they had founded the Project for a New American Century on. And so what they're saying is we should not tolerate any. And remember the time, this was the stated doctrine. We will not tolerate the existence of any Middle Eastern regime that supports terrorism. And supports terrorism can mean anything, right? Like Abu Nidal died in Iraq before the war even started and was a washed-up old terrorist from a previous day. But, that's good enough. Got Mujahideen commie terrorists who've worked for us ever since, but at that time was a good enough excuse to invade Iraq. They would invoke that. And so they made up that doctrine.
The Mujahideen were in Iraq as well as Afghanistan?
Well, this is a particular sect of Mujahideen kooks who are Iranian communist cultists who had left Iran and gone to work for Saddam Hussein and then were, he supported them. They had nothing to do with anti-American terrorism at that time except, I guess, committing it when they had worked for Iran previously during the Iranian Revolution. But by the time we invaded Iraq, Donald Rumsfeld inherited them, and they've worked for America and Israel ever since then. They have a base in Albania now. But in other words, though, this wasn't Al-Qaeda. This was not any real excuse. They would just invoke the doctrine of fighting terrorism in order to check off this list of all of these governments that they didn't like. And coincidentally and incidentally, and very importantly, of course, is this was really, in many cases, Israel's list of enemies.